Well, huge welcome everyone to this webinar on the Procurement Act, what you need to know. Thank you for joining on a Thursday morning. We're very excited to welcome you all. Just let me know, Matt, can you, you can hear me clearly?
Yeah, can you hear me too?
Fantastic, yeah, I can hear you clearly.
Great.
Excellent. Well, we'll kick this off and we'll let any other late arrivals join as they do. So we're very excited to talk through. It's now been around 15 months since the Procurement Act's been live, but really it's been the last 6 months that the effects have really started to bite. And so that's why we wanted to kind of kick the tires of it, see what's changed and how it's really starting to impact business on the ground. So without further ado, let's get underway. I want to start by introducing my co-host, the very experienced Matt Spencer, who has at least 20 plus years selling SaaS into the UK central government. He led Telefonica O2's £140 million public sector sales division and now works as a consultant to the IT sector on public sector market entry. So very welcome, Matt. Thank you for joining us. Very quickly on myself, I'm Chris Maitland. I'm the CEO at Jonty, and I have a background in management consulting and working for government clients, leading on and helping win lucrative tenders for major projects. I've also done a little bit of research through the Cambridge Judge Business School on barriers faced by SMEs in procurement. Welcome, Matt. Anything to add on my welcome?
No, it was good. Thank you. Looking forward to talking on this webinar, and a couple of names that I recognise, so hi to those folks. We'll catch up separately soon.
So today, I just wanted to quickly sketch out the agenda for today. We're going to canter through 6 topics that we hope are of relevance to those of you on the call who are wrapping your head around the Procurement Act, what it means for you. The first is talking in sort of general terms about the scale of the opportunity for SMEs in particular. Secondly, discussing some of the key changes that the Procurement Act has brought. And there are 7 key changes that we want to focus on that shift the balance in the favour of SMEs. Then we're going to discuss new SME spend targets, which affect the central government agencies. Matt's going to talk about a success story, in particular, an SME that's had a lot of success called Nuvoli, entering the public sector procurement market. We'll then have a 5-step playbook and then talk about some tools that can help you with your procurement journey. So let me kick off. Matt, do you want to talk to us about the scale of the opportunity that's out there?
Well, public sector is huge. It's the biggest single market that's available to any organisation in the UK, and there's lots of advantages to going for it, particularly if you're an SME, although it may not always feel like that when you start out. So total government spend around 407 billion, around that kind of number, which that's total government spend. It includes capital spend and some intergovernmental spend, but it's a huge number. And there's been a lot of effort to spend money with SMEs that's been in the narrative for many years now, but it really changes under the new Procurement Act. It gets a lot more serious. But 45.2 billion of spend directly with SMEs in the UK, which is very significant, and it's a 6-year high. Not totally equally good story across the whole of public sector procurement, and we're going to look on the next slide about where spend it currently is and where it's going up, and where government has identified that it needs to do more. So the 8.4 is slightly down, but I think that's just spurring government on to give more opportunity to SMEs. So big spend with SMEs in the wider public sector, education and training, and recruitment, which is huge. Much more spend coming out of local authorities into SMEs. So when you start to segment the market, if you don't want to have to make the case for SMEs, then the case is already made, and there's already significant amounts of spend across local gov. 34% share and sustained growth. So that's going really well, and you're pushing on an open door. Education and training, very SME based, and I think that's a lot to do with the fact that currently education and training is very fragmented. So you've got a very large number of organisations spending in relatively small contractual increments. So I think that's why that naturally is a space for SMEs, because it's also a fragmented market. NHS and health needs to do more. Not quite so much emphasis in the narrative about what they're doing about it, and because they will play the risk card. So still opportunity for SMEs, but let's just jump to defence and aerospace. Very difficult for SMEs. Perhaps except at the very new technology end, where they're really keen to talk to the innovators that are bringing stuff in that you're only going to get from an SME. Much more difficult to penetrate with the big contracts, because we know they go to these huge organizations that can make battleships and fighter jets. And whilst SMEs are part of the supply chain, what we're looking at here is direct spend, not indirect spend. So defence and aerospace, probably more difficult to penetrate, and your strategy is probably subcontractor rather than direct contractor. But we're going to talk a bit more in a little while about central government, who have no excuses for not spending more with SMEs and are trying to put some things in place to make sure that they bring themselves up to the level. And when we talk about that, as an SME, that's the kind of narrative that you need to bring to any conversations with them, to say, hey, we're here and you're mandated to look at us. We'll talk about that in a minute. Does that make sense, Chris?
Absolutely. Should we have a look at some of the key changes? I think you've sort of hinted at some of them already that have come through this change to the procurement regulations. And I mean, it's worth pointing out that while it's called the Procurement Act 2023, it didn't actually come into force until February 2025. And as I mentioned, there was a bit of a lag before those regs really started to bite, because you saw on the government side, the buyers were still able to release tenders under the old regs for a period. And then there was a sort of a transition throughout last year where you saw the new regs really start to bite. So, and that's why we're seeing kind of in the last 6 months more evidence of what those changes have really come to include. Let's talk to some of those, Matt. I mean, one of the first things that the new procurement legislation requires is that the legislation itself has a legal duty on government buyers, to consider SME barriers. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, so it's explicit. So the legislation is explicit. There's a duty when they're constructing their procurements to consider SMEs in their procurement. And when you see opportunities published on Finder Tender and Contracts Finder, there's now a flag that says SME compatible or not. It also refers out to the National Procurement Policy Statement, and that also is explicit on trying to encourage SMEs. So it's explicitly in there, and it also refers out to secondary procurement policy which requires them to do it. So it's in there. Why do we care as buyers, as sellers rather? Because if we see a contract and we think they could have done a better job of making it SME friendly, or even when the tender's published or when the pre-procurement note's published, then feel free to quote that legislation back at them and say, hang on a second, if you thought about this, this and this, more SMEs could bid. I've just done that very thing in a pre-market engagement call that I was on before this one. So yeah, it's in there.
Let's talk about this next one, the next key change, Matt. One registration used everywhere. This is a change that came through the procurement regs, establishing a central digital platform where all advertised open tenders would be advertised. In a sense, it's really Finder Tender Service, isn't it, Matt? But there is ambition to continue to build that into that central place to go for opportunities.
Yeah, so it's there. If you want to bid now, you need to be registered on the central digital platform. it's not particularly difficult, but there are a couple of things you have to know. You have to know your Dun & Bradstreet number. You have to have a couple of sets of accounts which you can publish to it. You have to know your company registered number and some things like that. But it's relatively trivial to get on. You should have those things anyway. And once you're on, you get your PPON, your public sector identification number. And it's useful to have a note of that because tenders ask you for your PPON. And also, it's becoming more common now for what's called a share code, which you get when you register. And that share code you need for some tenders, because you share that share code and then that gives them access to the information that you published. Does mean you've got to have registered, does mean that you need to keep it up to date because you need to make sure that your report and accounts as they become available get published to it, so they're available through the share code. At the moment, there's a bit of duplication I'm finding. I do a lot of portal stuff and I'm still getting asked the same question twice, but equally, I'm seeing more and more of these bids now saying, just give us your share code and we'll pull the information that we want. So very helpful for SMEs. It's just do it once and then you're available to everyone to use.
And then number 3, we talk about no insurance at the bid stage. So this is removing that challenge that was a barrier for some SMEs, which was that they had to have all their insurance in place before they could bid on certain contracts. And now the change is that it's only required at the contract awards stage, not prior.
Yeah, so this is part of a general thing that I'm seeing as well. So quite often you get bid pre-qualifications that requires you to have things in place, including insurances, when there's no intention to start the contract for another 18 months, 2 years. And so there's an argument that you can bring not only around insurance, but things like ISO certifications and say, why do I need it today when I've got 2 opportunities, and so does everyone else, to have lost this certification by the time you go live? So why don't you make it so that we can have this stuff in place when we actually need to be paying for it and when we actually need to do it? And I have a good degree of success in getting that thinking changed through clarification questions. But for a new entrance to the market, this is quite handy because it means you don't have to pay the money out. You may have to provide evidence of getting quotes for it, so it shows that you've taken some steps to get this thing in place and that you've done the due diligence to know that you can be insured and it is affordable. So I've seen that in a couple of things recently. But it's all about shifting the costs for an SME to when they're actually closer to when they're going to start to get the revenue. So very, very helpful.
Number 4 is a huge change, I think, for especially for small and medium-sized enterprises, which is the earlier publication of warning that a tender is going to come live. And there's different names used under the new regs for these kinds of notices. There's pipeline notices. There's also pre-market engagement notices. And I was seeing that there's been quite a spike in the number of these pre-market engagement notices over the last kind of 6 to 12 months, which is a sign that if you're able to stay on top of the kind of flow of information coming through Find a Tender service and these kind of, then you should, as a smaller sized business, be having more time to prepare for those tenders when they finally go live. And of course, that gives you an advantage because the larger players usually will have kind of larger bid teams able to move much more quickly when they spot something, or have teams of people who are well connected to all the right people in government to get early tip-offs about opportunities coming through them. So this is a real game changer, I think. Matt, tell us about your reflections on these kind of notices and how people can see them.
The most significant impact that I've seen out of the Procurement Act, lots and lots of pre-market engagement notices. So we're seeing things like planned procurements, planned procurement notices. They're quite helpful because you know something's happening in 18 months' time and you can start to think about it and get your ducks in a row. The pre-markets are where the real work is, though, or the real hard work for people wanting to take part in the market, and you have to take a realistic view of it. So your pre-market engagements are referenced in the Act. It says, "Thou shalt engage the market." What I was hoping was that meant that I'd be able to have lots of ad hoc conversations with the public sector because they feel more confident about engaging the market, but it hasn't quite landed that way. The way it's landed is that they've started a whole bunch of within procurement process asks out to the market. And these pre-market engagements can be as simple as, please let us know that you would be interested in this procurement when it comes out. It's going to broadly look like this. Can you just let us know who you are and we'll put you on the list? Right the way through to something that feels like you're supplying a tender before the tender. Also, public sector is not all doing this in the same way. So you can get an organization that looks like what it's trying to do, and I've just come off a call with NHS Blood and Transplant, literally before this one, where they really do seem to be coming out and saying, we've got a big thing that we need to buy, and we'd really like some guidance and feedback on how we're going to structure things and how we might want to buy it. So that's kind of a genuine, you can get involved and you can shape this. We want to understand about you. You need to understand about us. So some look like that. Some just look like massive pre-qualification documents. And the buyer is just looking for confirmation that what they've decided they already want is what they're going to buy. So the first thing to say about these pipeline notices, and it was made very clear by NHS Blood and Transplant a minute ago, they don't prejudice the procurement. So if you partake in a pre-market engagement or you don't partake in a pre-market engagement, it doesn't impact your ability to win the tender. It doesn't impact your ability to bid for it or not. What I'd encourage everyone to do is when they see a pre-market engagement and it's relevant, is register for it. That's your baseline entry. What it does is it gets your email and your company information and your email address registered with the buyer. So when they start to publish stuff, you're going to get a direct email that says, hey, we're publishing this stuff. Hey, we've got a webinar next week, whatever. So you're in the loop. Have a more considered view about whether you're going to spend all your time and effort on filling in their sometimes very detailed pre-market engagement questionnaires, the bits that feel like tender. My advice on that, and we're going to say it again in a little while, is it's not fire and forget. So make sure that you have a strategy to try and win. Once you put all that effort into filling in the pre-market engagement stuff, make sure you've got a strategy, whatever that looks like, to try and maximize your chance of winning. Whether that's preparing your own organization, whether it's trying to build up rapport with the buyer or other suppliers that might have relationships with the buyer, whatever that looks like for you, make sure you've got it. When your sales guys say, I've got a lead, you don't say, oh, that's a lead, great, now, and then never talk about it for the next, well, you shouldn't, for the next 12 months. And did you finally ask them whether they won or not? You say, how's that lead going? You should do exactly the same and treat a pipeline notice as exactly the same as a lead through the sales process. But it's really significant. Don't think it's found its level yet. And I'm really hoping, and I'm going to be really pushing that we can have some pre-market engagement before this process even starts. But there's a bit of work to do with the public sector to get them to think that way. But really, really important, really significant. And if you've got people doing bids, this can double, treble the amount of work that they've got very easily.
Let's go to number 5, meet to mat. Now, those who haven't sort of chosen to get their head around these acronyms. So this is a change in the way the government thinks about how it values, how it weighs the opportunities, the tenders coming through. And previously, the test for that was most economically advantageous tender. It's now been a change to remove the E to make it most advantageous tender. Matt, talk to us about what that sort of change means on the ground.
So it's being on the ground is the critical point of your question here. What it implies is that economics, which is the financial element, does not have to be as important as it was under meet. So it's stopped being explicit. This means for an SME that if you can bring more social value into it, although that's often evaluated separately, or you can bring more value through your agility and that sort of thing, then that theoretically they can score for that within the tender. So this is really about scoring and evaluation. It's what it's about, and it's saying there's potentially less emphasis on the price than on the rest of the quality of the tender. However, that was always available, and anyone that's bid for public sector knows that the scoring is usually split between a percentage which they allocate to quality and a percentage which they allocate to commercials, and that percentage is normally can change. I've seen it as high as 100% for price, where they believe they're really buying a commodity, and down to kind of 20% if they think that quality is everything and price isn't quite so important. So this is a perception thing for me, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Again, it's something that if I was in dialogue with a customer and they're talking to me about their tender, I might be asking them how they're accommodating match versus meet. So it's material, but they're still using the percentages. What's coming, and will be interesting to see how this plays out, is a proportional value judgment for pricing. So whereas your pricing score was calculated, your score as a percent as where you sat against the cheapest price, and now looking at amortizing your price against your total quality score. So rather than looking at you against the cheapest bid, actually dividing the price by the total quality score and getting a percentage, a pound per quality point. And that is starting to be talked about. Haven't seen it in a tender yet, but this is an interesting change that some, particularly I think in the more quality-based tenders, this is something that we might see change. So have a look at that and think about how that might impact your pricing and your bidding strategies.
Let's jump to 6. 30-day payment throughout the supply chain. So this affects SMEs, especially those ones that are subbing to a prime in the kind of in the public sector ecosystem. This is designed to put pressure on those primes that are the direct recipients of a government tender opportunity to ensure that they're paying the SMEs that are feeding into that supply chain within 30 days, so that they're not squeezing the SMEs in their supply chain and therefore make it very difficult for those SMEs to enter the kind of the market here. What do you have to add on top of that, Matt?
It's been the direction of travel and the desire for a while. The bigger companies have already been under scrutiny for it. It's very helpful in public sector, with the caveat that public sector sometimes don't pay in 30 days because they're disorganized, but or something goes wrong. But it's really helpful for an SME. I think a couple of things. Public sector organizations don't go bust. They might say they go bust, but actually, like Birmingham City Council, for example, but that doesn't mean they stop paying their bills. So it's very stable. It is supposed to be happening throughout the supply chain. What I would say is that bidding as an SME, I've also been asked a question. And on at least 2 occasions in the last 6 months, I've had to provide evidence that I'm paying my subcontractors as an SME within 30 days. So it's great. It's really helpful because it helps with cash flow, and that's really important for an SME. Not the whole story though. You must still think about when payment kicks in. So if, for example, you're implementing something or building something, what are the payment milestones? So it's great being paid within 30 days, but not if the payment milestone doesn't kick in until 6 months after you bought the first piece of the first brick that you needed to build the wall. So It's great that it's there. It's great that it's explicit. Don't hesitate to complain if it's not occurring. So use it in your own favour. Kick up a stink if it's not happening.
And the final one that we've mentioned here, changes benefiting SMEs through the new regs, is this competitive flexible procedure. Talk to us about that, Matt.
So this is most beneficial if you've, in my view, if you've been able to influence the tender in a way that makes the procurement process useful to you. So I'm seeing this quite a lot. It's replaced the slightly difficult negotiated procedures. In the software world, what I'm now seeing is I submit my pre-qual, they go quiet. They then ask me to submit a tender. Part of the tender evaluation now, and we're going to see this a lot more often, is demonstration of the thing that you've said that it actually works. So in software terms, that's a demo. In product terms, that might be supplying them with a product. And then in software terms, I've also seen very recently the requirement for a sandbox. So set them something up so that they can play with it for a bit. It does allow you, and I think this is why it's good for SMEs. If you're competing against somebody with a big brand, then their brand almost fills in the, yeah, we're great people, yes, we got all the resources, yes, we know what we're doing, yes, you can trust us. And that's the only, and the brand does the interaction. What the competitive flexible procedure does is a lot of them are building in more touch points with the customer. That's your opportunity as an SME to actually sit in front of the customer and go, do you know what? We are also great people. We also know what we're doing. You can also trust us. And you can start to build that, because what you're seeing is more procurements having more touch points. What you have to be aware of, though, and you have to be prepared for, is they can basically invent what the heck they like. So if part of the procedure is you must be able to run 100 meters in 15 seconds, and they build that into the procurement, and they tell everybody that that's in the procurement, they can put it in the procurement. Okay, stupid example, but you know, they can basically put what they like in. So you've got to be prepared to understand what's there, be prepared for the typical things that you might expect from your product and market. And as I've mentioned already, really don't be afraid to challenge if you think something's disproportionate. If in doubt, see point 1, legal duty to consider SME barriers. If they're suddenly putting something in which says you need to supply us with 100 samples of your bit of kit, and that's going to cost you 20 grand, then you kick up a stink. You say, hang on a second, is that really reasonable for this contract for an SME? So refer everything back to your SME barriers. But it's good. I think it is good, and I'm seeing some really interesting things, and it's exciting as an SME that I'm working with at the moment that we're getting much more opportunity to interact.
Brilliant. Let's jump to the next slide, Matt. And this slide shows you some of the ambition, if you like, that the government has set itself under the new regulations. And these, what we've set out here is the SME spend targets that some of the key central government agencies have set themselves to reach by March 2028. So this is a good way for an SME to see where some of the buyer's ambition lies, if your services are appropriate to serve to these particular ministries, then starting to analyze, I guess, recognizing that they themselves have certain targets to meet and using that in the process in order to give yourself that edge. So, I mean, you can see here the DSIT, the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology, has set itself a 40% SME spend target by March 2028. DCMS 33%, Cabinet Office 30%, Treasury 22%. As Matt has pointed out, for the Ministry of Defence, of course, things are a little bit different. A lot of the products and services that they procure are more specialised, of course, but they themselves have also set themselves a target of 7.5 billion spend which would be a 50% increase on their 2023-24 numbers. So this is a good signal, I guess, is the key reason we put this slide in here to SMEs to say, look, the government is putting down on paper that we have these ambitions to spend this much with SMEs. So I think it's an excellent opportunity to be watching this space, especially these key ministries, for an opportunity for getting your foot in the door. Let's jump to the next slide, where Matt's going to talk us through an SME success story, an SME that perhaps didn't think that they were in with a good chance of selling to government, didn't think their services would be appreciated by government, but actually found that they were very much welcomed. Matt, you know these guys well. Talk to us about Nuvali and their story.
Yeah, so Nuvali, great business that looks at saving costs on mobile phones, basically by rooting out all the excess spend in organizations and telling them about it. They do a great job. Great business. Really like them a lot. They were a supplier of mine, and then when I went separate, I reached out to them and said, "You're missing a trick. Let me help you look into the public sector market." And so they go, "Well, we don't really know how." So they were going indirect, but clearly there was a market need because they were supplying stuff indirectly. But what they were able to do, and what I advise any SME to do, is to look for the right frameworks. So it happened that there was a correct framework. I understood the framework, and there was a lot on that framework which was really, really good for them. So they were able to bid for and get on that framework. And if you're familiar with G-Cloud, the barrier to entry is really low. And it's got 5,000 or maybe 5,000 suppliers on it, something like that. They were able to get onto one of the really much more stringent frameworks, RM6261, which is Mobile Voice and Data Framework. And they were able to get on. They got some of their ducks in a row, so they were in a good place, properly, very professionally managed organization, but they were able to get on. And we're going to see from a clip from Bruce in a minute that they didn't know what they were getting into. They had a lot of trepidation, but approaching it professionally and with a calm head, able to get on and are really winning a lot of work direct in public sector. So there's a note here. And also a key point here is they weren't afraid to engage with Crown Commercial Service, now Government Commercial Agency. And as a result of that engagement, actually got far more support than they ever thought they were going to get, and have ended up being a case study. So go for it, is my advice.
So let's have a look, a little quote from them. Here's their CEO, Bruce. Very quick.
We're probably one of the best examples of an organisation who the public sector was always quite daunting for us. It always felt as if we were just a small player in that public sector arena. But actually, being small and agile and independent really is a benefit to the public sector, because we're not weighed down with the fact that we're a big organisation. And SMEs can be really successful in this environment, because there's a lot of encouragement for SMEs to be successful, because that's part of what CCS want to achieve. If there's one thing that I wish I'd known about the process, it would be, don't be scared, don't be overawed, don't worry about it, just be honest about what you do, talk about where your strengths are, and really try to get to terms with what differentiates you and why you think the public sector could be an opportunity for you, and why you could be an opportunity for the public sector.
So I guess in a nutshell, Matt, the real success for them was getting on the framework. That's the key sort of takeaway for the Nuvali story. Is it worth, just very quickly for anyone on the call who say hasn't sort of wrapped their head around what frameworks are and how they differ from a standard sort of open tendering process, to just quickly give a back of the envelope explanation of that?
Yeah, sure. So a framework is a procurement vehicle which is set up by a public body, a lot of them by Government Commercial Agency, for a specific subset of products or services. And the way that a framework is structured is that suppliers are vetted and authorized in order to get onto the framework, in simple terms. And suppliers sign up to the terms and conditions of the framework. That framework then becomes available to all public sector bodies, utilities, charities, housing associations to use. They also sign up to the terms and conditions of the framework. So all the vetting and the terms and stuff is already done in advance. Then typically what happens is a thing called a call off. So a call off then is where the buyer says, I'm going to buy some stuff off the framework. Let's just say mobile phones, and I want to buy this many, and I want to buy it from you. And then the call off just becomes the agreement for them to buy 10 mobile phones off you, but all the terms and conditions that surround it are already set up and done through the framework. Benefit is for the buyers, they don't need to do all of that additional stuff. Some frameworks, really quickly, some frameworks require additional competition. So a mini tender, if you like, is published under the framework, but usually not anywhere near the complexity of a full tender. Some tenders, some frameworks, and it's worth looking at, still allow a thing called direct award, where they don't have to run a mini competition first. And there are different types of frameworks, which I'm not going to go into now, but just Google, just AI, what's a framework, and you'll get a good answer on that.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, it's sort of like an Amazon, isn't it, or an Argos catalog that government departments can go and sort of pick the products they want rather than have to go out to an open tender in quite the same way.
Yeah. Some look more like catalogs than others. Some look more like just mini tender portals.
We wanted to talk quickly, give some practical sort of the 5-step playbook, if you like, of things that you could do this week that could get you in the foot in the door, getting you started on your procurement journey, if that's the stage you're at, or making sure that you're staying sharp and fleet-footed. Let's rattle through these, Matt, and then I should point out that we're going to share the slides after this webinar, so it can be a resource that you can go back to. But I think we've already covered off one quite well. Register on the central digital platform. I mean, that's going to be key to getting your foot in the door, to getting access to those opportunities that are advertised. Number 2, use a tool to stay on top of the volume and make sense of it for you. Now, I think we talked about the fact that these regs have added a lot more volume to the kind of notices that are coming through the platforms like Find a Tender Service, especially those pre-market engagement notices, pipeline notices, as well as, of course, when the tender goes live and when contracts are awarded. So while the early warning is a real boon for SMEs, the trouble is the volume now creates more work to stay on top of the kind of amount of information coming at you. And that's something that we here at Jonty have identified and have realized that for a lot of small and medium-sized enterprises in particular, they don't want to be spending their Monday morning sifting through 50 to 60 different opportunities, trying to triage them all and work out which of them are truly well-suited and what actions they should take off the back of that. And that's why we've built a tool to help using AI to pull out only those opportunities that are perfectly matched to a particular business and sending it through to your inbox with a quick paragraph below explaining why it's a good match and the kind of capture strategy, if you like. You know, for example, here's an email address, reach out to this person today to get in the conversation, those kind of tips. So I think these days, given the volume, staying on top of that volume and finding a tool that works for you is really important. We've talked about 3, getting on the right frameworks. Matt's mentioned what they are. I think they will depend on the services you're providing, of course. So we've put a link at one of the final slides here of how to go searching for the different frameworks that are out there. You will hear a lot of people talk about them as CCS frameworks, Crown Commercial Service frameworks, but to avoid too much confusion, that agency has changed its name to Government Commercial Agency only this year. So just look out for that. A lot of people still use the word CCS, but actually Government Commercial Agency is the new name. But check out their site, the GCA site.
Yeah, and a few others as well. So there's the University Purchasing Consortium. There's there's NEPO, Northeastern, there's WIPO, Yorkshire, there's Crescent Purchasing, which are more education-based, there's shared business services. So again, having the right tool to cut through some of that is quite helpful, because there's a lot of frameworks. There's more published opportunity through frameworks than government actually spends. Another quick thing on frameworks. The new framework under the Procurement Act are open frameworks. So frameworks used to be for a period, and so you knew if you didn't get on in year 1, you wouldn't get an opportunity again till year 4 when they redid the whole thing. They can now let a framework for up to 8 years, but they're encouraged to open the framework. So every couple of years, or whatever frequency they decide, they'll open the window again. The basis of the framework won't change, but there's an opportunity to get on. So now you need to be cognizant of, I may have missed the start of this framework, but I need to be vigilant for when they're going to open it again, because there's another chance for me to get in. So just there's just a lot of complexity to keep an eye on.
Number 4, show up to market engagement. I mean, I think we've kind of flagged this already throughout this talk, that there are these opportunities to get your foot in the door. I think this has often been the place where SMEs have not been able to match it with the better resourced organizations who have sort of full-time sales, business development people getting out there, meeting the buyer. But this really do seize the opportunity of these pre-market engagement notices. You know, maybe it doesn't feel like the tender's live yet, so it's not worth of your attention, but a quick email, even just as part of that process, or jumping on a webinar, is a way of getting your name out there, your face out there, and getting in the minds of the buyers, because they're humans as well. They're large organizations, but they're still humans who need to understand what you do, need to understand what your brand is. And of course, the more you can get in that conversation, it will always help that. And then finally, a follow-up plan and capture strategy. Now, maybe there's a bit of info on the slide there, but I'm wondering, just in the interest of time, Matt, whether we might go to questions now. We'll share these slides with everyone on the call, but I wondered if anyone wanted to jump in the chat with any questions. We can jump to questions, and then, but very happy to.
What people are thinking about that, I just want to point 5. The biggest mistake that I see SMEs making is the assumption that public sector is entirely process driven. It's very process driven, but you must treat it like you treat every other market that you have. It needs proactivity and a strategy to win in it. If you're just relying on the documents, that you're not going to grow.
Just to say, I mean, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We hope you found it informative and useful, and that there's some practical steps there as practical takeaways for navigating public sector procurement. Matt and I are around to take any further questions if you'd like. We'll share our email addresses, and otherwise very happy to talk to anyone who would like to explore more on the kind of tooling side as well. We here at Jonty are very much trying to provide the kind of tools that can help you cut through the noise. That's what we're aiming to do.